Okay. Welcome to today's webinar and parent training on academic goal setting. My name is Lemiola Arinkatola. And just as a reminder, I want to make sure that those of you who are joining us today or catching the replay, that you were able to download the quick and easy academic goal planning tool for today. Let's start this new year off right with some academic goal setting for our children. For those of you who are not familiar with me, as I stated before, my name is Lemiola Arinkatola. I'm a mom, an author, and educator, and I specialize in developing cool and fun critical thinking tools and curriculums that help both the parents and their children have a more interesting and fun academic experience. So we know critical thinking spans across all of the academic subjects. So we really are casting a wide net. Some of the things that I do on a routine basis, I'm the creator of the Critical Thinking Bootcamp, which is based here in Chicago and actually provides a lot of enrichment and academic acceleration for those who are planning on getting into selective enrollment or gifted programs, or for those who are looking for, just something to challenge their child. I also go around and I speak at different conferences related to education. This month I'll be speaking at the Illinois Gifted Association Conference. And then in next month, I believe I'm on the agenda for the Kentucky Math Conference. So you may see me travel around from state to state, for those of you who are joining us, across the nation. Also, I go inside and work with schools and develop my my teaching strategies and share that with other educators who are looking for, ways to stretch their students' thinking and give them a fun challenge, and then also improve their academic experience. So I've been doing this for about a decade, actually a little bit more than a decade, but solidly for a decade as far as building my own curriculum and my blueprint, which we'll talk a little bit about later, because I'm going to share with you some of the lessons learned about goal setting and how I go about goal setting for my own children. Okay, some of you may have seen some of our techniques. We've been featured in today's Parent, Chicago Tribune, and a host of others. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the structure of goals. Why don't you type into the chat and let me know if you are familiar with this model. This is not a new model, and I'm betting those of you on the call are very familiar with what we call SMART goals. Now, SMART goals, the first time I was introduced to SMART goals was when I was an undergrad at the University of Illinois taking a business class. And they talked about SMART goals and what it meant to have solid goals and objectives from the standpoint of running a business. So some of us adopted those strategies into our own personal life. Can any of you recall a situation where you've adopted SMART goals that includes S for specific, meaning you know the what, the why, the who of this goal, this objective, etc. The goals need to be measurable. So that means you have to be able to track the action and the outcome. And when we think of measurable, we have to think of numbers, because if you're not showing any numbers, you're not showing any type of measurement. These goals have to also be achievable. So really, you have to have the resources to be able to achieve these goals. Okay, so just like in our workplace, if I think back when I was working in corporate America, and we had lots and lots of implementation strategies to do that required, policies that were coming down from the government, and my role was to train and to teach and to help physicians and doctors implement some of these requirements. And we needed to have the resources because the doctors were scattered all over the United States. So for them to be achievable, you have to have the resources. They also have to be relevant. If they're not relevant to the overall mission, you probably heard that before, then why do that goal? How does it fit into the big picture? So when you're setting out your own personal goals, you're thinking about, how does this fit into the overall big picture for me? And then, of course, last but not least, time bound. We need a timeline, a deadline, a date, the when. When is this goal going to be completed? So not only the how and the why, but the when. And this is the recipe that makes up a SMART goal. So if you work in corporate America, or you own your own business, or you're looking at improving your own, personal achievement, and you do research, you'll find that this is a common blueprint that is widely used. And the reason being is because it's effective. But today I'm going to share with you a blueprint that you probably haven't seen before, especially if you haven't attended some of my webinars in the last 6 months. So I'll be excited to share with you a different kind of SMART goal structure. During this time, we do reflect. It's, the top of the new year, and we're doing a lot of reflection from the previous year, looking at some of our challenges, our opportunities, and our successes. And as, parents and educators, we often do this. And we look back and say, what did we do well? And I apologize, I think that's a typo. It's what went well. It should have been what went well. That's the alliteration for you. We've got 5 W's. So we want what went well and why. And then we also look at what didn't go well and why, okay? So that way we can modify and make changes as necessary. So many of you are very familiar with this process. And then we look back and see what did we learn? Did I learn that I have to go back to school and get a degree? What did I learn? Why didn't I get that promotion? Or why did I get that promotion? And how can I continue to do the things that led to that promotion? Maybe some of you had financial success, or maybe some of you had financial loss. So from all of these things, our success stories and our opportunities for improvement, we want to be able to analyze that. And we often do a good job when we're thinking about our, personal aspirations and our personal mission and goals for ourselves, or perhaps goals for others, meaning, the company you work for. But what about goals for our kids? Now, do me a favor and type in the chat, yes or no, if you have identified goals for your kids on a routine basis as part of your perhaps New Year's resolution, or any time during the year. Is that something you routinely do and put in the time and energy and effort to track and to see if those goals are measurable, achievable, and you have the resources for them? And I know as parents, it can be highly overwhelming sometimes to think about your own goals that you have for yourself, and then the goals of balancing that of your child or your children. But today I'm going to share a little secret with you, a technique that I've used myself, and that has been incredibly valuable. I mentioned before that I'm a mom, and I have 3 kids. They're all teenagers now, but 1 in college and 2 on the way. So I've had this whole experience of setting goals for them since they were in preschool. So that's nearly, 20 years of setting goals for my children. That's a lot of goal setting. And so I've learned a lot along the way. And one of the things that we want to be able to, that I want to be able to share with you, let me just move this out the way, is the number 1 goal that matters. We want to focus on goals that matter because time is so very precious. And I want to talk to you about how you can get focused on the goals that are truly important to your child's academic success. Because there's a lot of noise out there, right? You Google, there's information out there. You don't know what path to follow. You didn't have a blueprint when your child was sent off to school for the first day of kindergarten, right? You didn't get a receipt when you drop them off. So, we had all this anxiety and we put a lot of trust and faith into the educational system, but they cannot do it all. And there are a lot of loopholes, okay? So by setting goals that matter, you'll be sure to understand the why and the how to make sure that your child is getting the academic support that he or she needs, okay? The other thing is these goals have to be quick and easy, because let's face it, we have 24 hours in a day and something is always coming up. And you probably don't even have room to add any additional items to your task. So if it's not quick and easy, more than likely it's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done in a way that's going to make you feel good. And what we want to do is make sure that these goals get done in a quick and easy fashion. And so by doing that, we want you first to understand what is your why. Now, for those of you that have attended some of my previous webinars, I always talk about don't just trust me and what I'm saying. Do things because you understand your why. Have you ever had a situation where maybe you know someone, or perhaps it's yourself? I mean, I've been guilty of this before, where you hear maybe on the playground or in a school setting what other parents are doing with their children, and maybe you're eavesdropping or you're having a small chat conversation with the group, and then all of a sudden you start to feel like, wow, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I should be doing that. And then you get really overwhelmed because you begin to focus on their race and their goals instead of the goals you have for your own children. Understand your why, okay? Not every course or every enrichment class or every sports activity is good for every child, okay? So granted, that's why we typically, when kids are young, enroll them in a lot of different things so we can discover what is their best fit, okay? And that's what you have to do. You have to focus on what's good for your child so you can help him or her uncover what their passion and what their destiny is. And you've got 18 years to do so if you're starting off at preschool level. And then if you're starting off at maybe 6th grade or so, you've got less time than that. So there is a time window here, okay? So that's the good news. You have time. But the bad news is that time runs out very quickly if you're not doing anything. So we don't want the do nothing rule, right? We want to put a plan into place and take action. So here's my academic blueprint. This is the model I use not only for my critical thinking boot camp, not only to create the workbooks and fun sheets that I share with some of the school districts and with parents that they use at home. If I'm going out on a speaking event and what I'm educating others about, this is the blueprint. And this is my smart blueprint that I put together. And it works. This is what we actually use in our live classes, as well as, again, it is the bedrock of all of the teaching tools that I develop. So I look for these things when I'm creating a new curriculum, lesson, or product. What do I look for? Well, my S stands for spatial reasoning, and my M is math reasoning. So it's measurable, but it's math reasoning. My A is analogies. I'm looking for logic. And my R, definitely reading and literacy. So we all know we can't get too far without reading and literacy here in the United States as far as our education is concerned. And thinking, and that has a lot to do with critical thinking and problem solving. So let's quickly go over each one just to make sure you understand this blueprint. Spatial reasoning, what is it? Spatial reasoning, what you need to know and what my why is, why I focus on spatial reasoning is because there is decades and decades upon research out there that has proven that spatial skills is the #1 predictor for math success and STEM success. If a child has good, strong spatial skills, they are more than likely to do well or better than those who do not in any of the STEM disciplines. And STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And if you've been following the news, you know that this is the future of our children's career. All the talk about artificial intelligence, robotics, the time is now. The jobs of the future is going to require strong spatial skills, okay? And with spatial skills, if you don't know the definition, let's talk about what spatial skills is for those of you who don't know. At a very high level, spatial skills is a mental ability to be able to rotate objects in your mind without having to physically touch them. That's one aspect of spatial ability, and that's one of the most rigorous aspects, to be able to see objects, see shapes as they're being rotated, without having to physically touch them. So you're doing a lot of mental exercise. So what's missing in today's curriculum? The curriculum of today does not have enough spatial exercises so that children can be prepared for the future, okay? If it did, you would have a report card, in my opinion, that would say reading A, math A, spatial skills A. This skill is so very important, but yet we do not separate it to show its importance in the grading and in many of the tests that children are taking, unless they're taking some type of gifted or cognitive related test. Then they get the opportunity of robust spatial questions, but that's typically done if they're sitting for a test. Children should have these spatial exercises on a routine basis, okay? Here's one example of one of the questions from one of my learning tools. Can you determine what answer this is? And yes, parents, these are questions I have for you. So I wanted us to have some fun today. So I implemented some questions. So what's missing from our goal setting academically? Spatial practice. So looking at this question from left to right, so we're looking at it from left to right, the first box, the second box, the third box, the fourth, and then you need to pick your answer for the fifth box. What would happen next? What do you think? Type into the chat your answer A, B, C, or D, and then let's talk about that. I'll give you a minute to do so. The first box, as you can see, they all have dots. This one has 5, 4, 3, 2. I think you guys got it, right? What do you think the answer is? Some of you are thinking B or D. Let's count the dots. So you also have to look at the orientation of them too. So these are actually decreasing, okay? All right, so I can't jump out now and check your answers. I'll have to do that later because then that'll switch out the presentation mode. So we'll keep going and we'll come back to those. Here's another spatial activity. Okay, I told you we were gonna have some fun. These are one of the activities that we often use in our boot camp. We often use to stretch their thinking. This is how it works. This is a puzzle with a missing piece. And then we ask the children or adults, what piece will go into that, what piece will complete the puzzle? So here's a missing piece, a piece is missing, and they usually have 4 choices. We've got 2 here, A or B. What do you think? Please type into the chat for question 2 what that answer is, okay? All right. Okay, great. I see some of you have put in answer B. Excellent, excellent. Let's continue. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to make sure it's our job as parents that we know what spatial skills are, we know how to identify them, and that we implement it in a very fun and game-based way. And I have to tell you that because spatial practice is not easy. I mean, to be able to take objects and rotate them, you're talking about the skill set of an architect or someone who builds bridges or someone who lays out a two-dimensional blueprint for construction workers and can see that blueprint in three-dimensional form. It takes practice to get that good, okay? It really does. It takes practice. So we want to give them lots of practice in that regard in a fun way. Let's move on to the M, math reasoning. What does that look like? Well, many of you are familiar with Common Core standards or your state standards, depending on what your district is using. So these are relatively easy to follow. Here's just a sample. All of this information is readily available within your school district, okay? But not every school district is following the same blueprint. But if you were to check out the Common Core standards, you'll see that it really was designed to provide an opportunity to level the playing field of education, no matter what state the student resided in. So it was developed with great intentions to make sure that the students were ready to compete on a global basis, academically and be career ready. So I find these standards of great rigor, and I feel that students who are able to achieve these standards or above the standards tend to be those in our camp that are scoring within the top 5 and 10%. So there's some weight to this, even if you don't believe in the philosophy or the politics behind the Common Core. What I do is I look for those opportunities just to make sure that the students are competitive with their education. So regardless of the grade, the Common Core standards are outlined and they're free and they're on the website K through 12. Okay, I just happen to post K through 4 here. And here's an example of the math standard, okay? So that's a particular why. That can be your why. You want to make sure that your child is doing well from a national standpoint. But what is missing when it comes to math? What is missing? Why are children having such difficulty with problem solving, and then later on with pre-algebra and then algebra? And again, having taught children from an early age and then, going up to the high school level, I've been able to see some of the missing pieces here. And one of the big proponents that have been missing in the early elementary years and even beyond that is the skill of subitizing, okay? Now, what is subitizing? Subitizing is the ability to instantly recognize objects without having to count one by one by one. Sounds a little bit similar to spatial reasoning, right? So we want them to be able to count certain objects without having to physically touch it. This is a lot of brain power, guys, okay? The top students, the students who are comfortable in the way that they're learning today in the classroom, they have a lot of mental flexibility in these skills. So let's do an activity, okay? So I need you to look at the screen on this one, okay? Because this is gonna go by very fast. I'm gonna flash something on the screen very quickly, and you're going to count and tell me how many you see. Okay, are you ready? All right, get ready, here it comes. Okay, did you see that? Type into the chat how many you were able to see. And let's see if you guys are coming up with the same numbers. That activity that we just did was called subitizing. Some of you call it subitizing, tomato. It's the same thing, okay? So this was the actual number that I saw on the screen for those of you who put in 7, yay. Okay, here's the way the brain works, okay? There's research that shows that our brain, given a line like this, can only subitize up to 5 dots in a row with accuracy. After that, we are guessing. And this goes for the young brain and the adult brain, okay? So this is the reason why we put together subitizing activities in the form of dominoes and dice, because when students are able to formulate shapes and formulate groupings of dots, then it makes subitizing a lot easier. And here you see an example of how they're able to do, one example of how we help them in our boot camp and in our tutoring sessions of helping kids to develop their subitizing skills. So it's a lot of fun work, and they're using dominoes and dice and dot arrangements, etc. So that is a skill that is so fundamental to early numeracy skills that a lot of kids miss. And it unfortunately impacts their ability to solve word problems down the line, to be able to think outside the box when it comes to math. And unfortunately, we have too many students who today are stating that they don't like math. And it's probably because they don't get it. They don't get the fun in math. They're not seeing the connection. And subitizing is about seeing the connection. Okay, so you see the different arrangements of how we can create 7. It's not just in a number form. They have to be able to have a quantity in their mind. And if they don't get this early and often, later on we see students are struggling. A is for analogies, and that's about logic. Okay, so what's missing? What I find is that there are a lot of logic exercises that typically come later. What I mean by later, 4th and 5th and 6th grade, and sometimes later than that, depending on what your school's curriculum is. And students should be able to start logic practice or working with analogies, which is a great example, as early as kindergarten. We've developed these tools and books, and we've seen the focus that we've seen has been incredible. Their ability to think outside the box and have flexibility and come up with some good solutions has been incredible. And one of the reasons is we introduce analogies early, okay? So for the young ones who can't read, we actually work with picture analogies, and then we work up to text analogies or word analogies like what you see here. Who can answer this analogy? The way analogies work, okay, and if you've ever taken any type of SAT or GMAT to get into grad school, you've seen some of these, right? But it's different to do analogies yourself, and then to teach your child is another story, right? So we won't even talk about that. But this is the way it works in the simplest form. We have a pair of words. Thirsty is to drink, as hungry is to what? So we have to find a relationship between the first pair of words and then the third word. We need to find a partner. Go ahead, type into the chat what you think your answer is. Thirsty is to drink, as hungry is to what? Is it starve? Is it bread? Is it eat? Restaurant, kitchen. So if I'm thirsty, which I'm thirsty now, so I'm just gonna get a swallow of water. Okay, and hungry would be to eat, right? Okay, great. Let's talk about the R in reading. Kids who love to read. What have we found about kids who love to read? Okay, when I started off as a parent turned tutor and really focusing on how to help my children actually prepare for the gifted test here in Chicago, but more importantly, I wanted them to have a lifelong appreciation for learning, and that included reading. So I had to discover ways on how to help my children, as well as other children I was helping in the community, find that appreciation for reading. But there was something missing. With each assessment that I did, with each tutoring session, I started to see a common denominator. And what was missing is what we call the phonological awareness. So many kids have missed the boat in terms of they didn't have access to it. Perhaps they skipped a grade and it wasn't taught in kindergarten or first grade. Maybe they were homeschooled, all different kinds of scenarios. Or maybe they learned it and then later they forgot it because they didn't get enough practice. So the phonological awareness is what they call early reading skills. And we are doing our children a disservice by calling it early reading skills, because early means you learn it and you forget it to some extent. And then kids call it baby work. This foundation you use for the rest of your life. These are reading skills in general. And unfortunately, we're seeing too many, I know personally, we're seeing too many kids of different age and grades coming in, struggling with reading for the simple facts that they didn't have the various components of the phonological awareness. That includes syllables and rhyming, but importantly, the phonic sounds. And I mean all 44 phonic sounds, not just the 26 letters of the alphabet, some of the consonants and the vowels, but the advanced vowels sound too, that most students just learn by sight as opposed to having a strategy. Okay, so kids who love to read, ask a kid today, find a kid who loves to read to take me on this challenge. They learned how to read. Somewhere along the way, they figured out the code and reading became an enjoyment for them, okay? Most kids who are struggling don't like to read. They're not gonna say they love to read because it's very frustrating if you can't get through the words and you can't decode the words, okay? So if you want your kid to learn how to read, learn to love to read, they need to learn how to read, okay? Thinking. That's all about the critical thinking. And how we go about that and finding out what's missing in critical thinking is that we don't ask our children enough why questions. Okay, lots of memorization going on. And it's not our fault, parents. A lot of what we do is what we learned how to do, or maybe it was passed down, or maybe we found it in our Google search. Again, we don't have a blueprint. So we're doing the best we can, right? But there's a whole lot of time being wasted trying this strategy, finding out it doesn't work, trying another strategy. You know, maybe you had success with your first child, but then you've got a second child who's different, thinks a little different, plays a little different, and some of your techniques that you had in the bag are not working, right? You need a solid blueprint that's going to work regardless of the learning style, regardless of their age, and regardless of what school they go to. Critical thinking is key, and the way to get your child to move up the critical thinking ladder, so to speak, is to move them beyond memorization, okay? To ask them questions that allows them to analyze and to compare things and to evaluate and to create. And once we're able to move them past that memorization, then we're helping them to build their critical thinking skills. So what are we going to do for the goals of this month? Okay, so many of you should have your tools ready. The academic goal planning tool. So step one, I want you to focus on one goal for each month. Don't overwhelm yourself, okay? You'd be surprised how much you can achieve with just one goal, okay? And it can be focused on grades. If you want to pull up one grade and help your child pull up that grade, maybe they have a C+, and you want to get it up to a B+, or maybe even an A before the end of the school year, then focus on that. Don't put too much on your plate, okay? If your goal for this month in January is to start to maybe do some research because you want to think about some other school options for your child, maybe this current school is not working for you, this is the time. Set that goal for this month. Make some calls, do some visits, check that off, and then determine, you know, what are the top 3 schools that I want to look at to consider for next year for my child. Maybe there's test prep or tutoring. We're coming to the new year, and selective enrollment testing is resuming this week, actually. But there are some who will be testing in February and maybe later on in the year, depending on what state you're joining the call from. Perhaps your child just needs a little bit of tutoring to be able to prepare for that NWEA test that they're having in the spring. That's one of the largest norm tests we'll find in this country, with millions and millions of kids taking that NWEA test. Think about your goal, think about the why, think about what's important, and how does it relate to those SMART academic blueprint, because those are the skills of the future, okay? And it's great to get, for example, I don't know, maybe an art grade up, or another ancillary grade. I think school is important, so it's hard for me to isolate one particular subject. But if it's not tied to the SMART skills and the SMART goals and the blueprint, I'm finding that, you know, you may be going in a different direction than what the future is actually calling for, okay? And if that's important to you, if making sure your child is prepared for the future and all of this investment and time that you're doing and resources to help him or her have the best academic experience, to perform at their best potential so that they can get into the best college that's the best fit for him or her, you need to be thinking about you need to be thinking about these skills rather. Perhaps you're looking for enrichment. Maybe your child is a straight A student, but there's something missing there. You feel that the classroom is not challenging enough, and you just want to keep that competitive edge that, you know, he or she has. You want to keep that going, or you know your child can use some extra work. Maybe this month you'll find an enrichment activity, maybe a course you'll sign up for. Maybe you'll find something new, a project that they haven't done before. All kinds of things that can be very creative. Now, this is what I want you to do. For the month of January, and you can have more than one goal, okay? But have at least one, okay? At least one. And I want you to just fill in the blank. Do you, as a goal, as a parent, need parent training? Is that one of your goals? When I first started out, when my children was young, I found that I needed a whole lot of parent training. And I went looking for it and hit a lot of brick wall, and realized that a lot of the training in this area were designed for teachers or those who wanted to, be a teacher. And I wanted the flexibility to be able to support my child and my children at home. So that's when I decided, to develop my own organization, the Critical Thinking Child, so that it'll give me the flexibility to learn and continue to learn on subjects that I feel are important. So training is a big, big part of my goal. It's a goal for me and for my children. So I actually take about 14 hours of professional development courses at a minimum every year, whether I sign up online or whether I sign up and travel and pay for the registration myself. And these are separate from my speaking events, because I want to know what is innovative out there, what tools are most effective, and where I should be spending most of my time so I can share that with parents like you. So take some time, think about what goal or goals would be important for you to complete this month. And then I want you to think about how you're going to take action. Step 2, I want you to share the goals. Okay, so this is our first strategy session. We need an accountability partner, either your spouse, your best friend. I can be your partner too. You can post your goal on the Facebook page. We have a group Facebook page, Extraordinary Parent Academy, and I would appreciate it and love for you to post one of your goals on Facebook, and then let's follow up. Let's make that goal happen this month. If you get stuck, I want to help you get unstuck. If you need a resource, I want to help you find that resource. You do not have to tackle it alone, okay? So Extraordinary Parent Academy, if you're not a member of this group, it is a closed group, but if you go ahead and put into Facebook, Extraordinary Parent Academy, and then I'll make sure that you get access to that group, okay? So let's think about the goals. And now I want to take time for your questions, okay? So I'm going to stop share and open the floor up for questions, and also read through the chat. Okay. Some of you will be setting goals for the first time, and this is so exciting. Okay. See, most of you got the questions right. Amazing. So this is how you get ahead. You start with small steps, okay? I mean, it was very difficult for me to set goals having a son and then followed by twins. And so, you're having multiples, it's just very challenging in and of itself. I mean, having one child is challenging, but trying to figure out what's best for multiples, that's a whole different challenge in and of itself. And what I found is that just focusing on one particular goal for improvement and making sure that I achieved that goal really helped me in the long run, where now, my daughters are straight A students. They've been on the academic honor roll, but I think more importantly, they have a love for learning. They have a love for learning that's initiated by, me giving them the opportunity to develop their critical thinking skills and finding the right resources to help them fill in the holes of what they didn't get within their school, right? Okay, so if you want to share any of your goals now while I'm on the call, feel free to do that. But if you have any questions, please type it into the chat. Okay, here's a question. Okay, here's a question here. What suggestions do you have for helping a kindergarten student with spatial reasoning practice? Okay. The best thing is puzzles. That's why we developed our abstract puzzles. There wasn't a whole lot of materials out there for developing spatial reasoning, but there are creative ways that I have found through the research. You can use dominoes, and I buy the jumbo kind. And what you would do is flash the domino and ask them how many. You can pair up the dominoes. You can use dice. If they're in kindergarten, I would use dice. I would use dominoes. So with the dice, you can play board games. There's all kinds of wonderful math board games that you can find where they roll the die or the dice, and they're actually having to really be able to count 5 without having to put their finger on each one of the pips, right? A good game for that, Chantel, is Chutes and Ladders, okay? That will teach them subitizing, that will teach them math reasoning skills, and a whole lot of other skills too. And I like to do games that's gonna teach more than one skill. The other activity would be, besides the puzzles and the dice and the dominoes, you can actually just create your own. Get a white sheet of paper and get a marker, and then create dots in different arrangements and flash those dots like flashcards, okay, and ask them how many. And then the purpose of that would be for them to group the dots in clusters. So if you showed a series of dots, let's say 7 of them, remember how the brain works. If it's in a straight line, they're not going to be successful. So you would scatter the dots, and then their job is to cluster like maybe 3 and 4. And so they would learn 3 and 4 together make 7, okay? If you need any more support with that, Chantel, just go ahead and send me an email. I would love to support you with that. I love the spatial reasoning activities and subitizing. For the kindergarten level, that goes hand in hand. Okay, Carla has a question. At what age do kids become intrinsically motivated to learn? Sometimes it's like pulling teeth with reading for my child. Math comes naturally, so no objections there. Yeah, sometimes kids will, what happens, I think, is when they find that that they're good at a particular subject, because kids only learn about subjects from their parents or when they enter school, right? They don't know that math is math and reading is reading unless we tell them that, okay? Other than that, they're just learning. And sometimes when they find that they're doing well in one subject and we give them a lot of praise, then they want to put more effort into that particular subject because they want to get the praise. So we have to be careful of praising our kids too early and too often. There's research from Dr. Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, Carol Dweck, on mindset. And she talks about how we give too much praise to the point where it actually backfires. And children, instead of improving, they get stuck and they get afraid of doing well because they don't want to disappoint. And I'm not sure if that happened in your situation, Carla. It is a common phenomenon. I mean, before I read her book and the research, I was doing some of the things that she said not to do, like call your child smart all the time when they finish a problem. Rather, you want to say, oh, you did a great job. Can you show me how you did it? Can we do another one? Because the moment they get something more challenging, then they don't feel smart. They feel like they're going to disappoint you and they don't want to try. Okay? So what we want to do is take a look at some of the way we're phrasing our praises to children. And then we want to be able to, number 2, introduce some of the strategies, in your case, reading strategies that's going to be fun. Because in order to get them back on board, they've already got in their mindset that it's frustrating and they're not good at it. And that translates to, I don't like it, or I hate it. So we have to turn that mindset around. And we've done that with kids time and time again. But you have to put in the element of fun. Just enough for them to build these skills that are lacking. So our assessment will identify if they're lacking in the phonetic sounds, comprehension, maybe as part of the phonemic phonological awareness. It could be a number of things that an assessment can uncover. But once you identify that and you start to work on completing that in a fun way, we see kids turn around all the time. I mean, I had non-readers in my household, and they went from non-readers to, we had to go to the bookstore every week. Okay, so it can certainly happen. I hope that was helpful for you, Carla. Are there any other questions? These are great questions, by the way. And, if you're thinking about a goal, and let's say your child is struggling with reading or math, okay? I don't want you to put down, I want to help my child improve his math grade. That is so vague, because math has so many components to it, and reading has so many components to it, okay? You need to take laser focus on what exactly, is the issue. And I know you don't often get a lot of data. Sometimes you're getting, just a report card with some comments. And sometimes you're getting a graph that just has a percentile or a percentage on it. And you're just looking at, 60%, 70%, 80%. And you don't know where to go from there. But there's a blueprint to this, okay? There's a blueprint. Reading is not new, okay? There is a roadmap for reading, okay? And if you don't know it, then you need to continue to attend these webinars to be educated, because it hasn't changed. I didn't develop English. I didn't develop reading skills. It was around when I was a kid, and it hasn't changed any. There's still 26 letters in the alphabet. I'm only saying that because I want you to get the understanding that you can do this, and it doesn't have to be as complicated. So with reading and math, you need to just take the one goal. Maybe that goal is, for reading, could be advanced phonics. We're going to learn the 44 phonetic sounds. That's what we're going to focus on. But I'm going to make sure he understands that. Or maybe it could be the 23 helping verbs, or how many helping verbs we have in English. There's a set number. Or maybe we're going to introduce, spelling was a problem. So I want to do some of the homonyms and homophones, or just something that is, age appropriate and grade level appropriate. And you can look at the Common Core standards for that. The same thing for math. Okay, so Phyllis has a question. Do you think the game Chutes and Ladders will be good for a first or second grader at all? It's good for a first or second grader if they cannot count to 100 or recognize numbers out of sequence to 100. The goal for first grade under the Common Core is that students would be able to recognize numbers between 0 and 120. Okay, so if they're struggling with knowing what comes before and after numbers within the decades, so like the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and if you can't start from any number, like let's say the number 67, and they can't tell you the number before and after that, then definitely it would be a fun game. But if they're able to do that, and they're able to skip count by 2s, 5s, and 10s and see patterns between, the 100 chart, then I think the game will certainly be fun. But you can probably find something a little bit more challenging than the Chutes and Ladders, okay? Now, if they're having trouble subitizing, because having said all of that, I have found students who have had trouble subitizing because they haven't had exposure to it. So some light gameplay should be important and will be important, but you can also get that through other board games as well, or playing with the dice and the dominoes like we talked about. So that's a very good question. So looking at what we call standard academic expectations by grade level, and like I said, I like the Common Core because it adds that level of rigor. And then I have a level of rigor that I add to it for critical thinking. But we help kids reach and stretch to that level based on their own ability. But if you start young, the key milestones, is kindergarten, 3rd grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, and now when I'm discovering, high school is really only 3 years. I was under the impression that high school was 4 years. But honestly, it's 3 years because colleges are looking at what you did freshman, sophomore, and junior year to make a determination if they're going to accept you or not. Because the beginning of your senior year is when, we're doing all these applications, which is what we're doing now. So that's when it hit me that, high school is really about that first 3 years. So you've got even less time than you really think if you're not doing anything, okay? So just kind of plan it out, and having this sort of planning strategy is really, really gonna help you, okay? Okay, let me check and see if we have any other questions. I'm checking the Q&A. And I'm checking the chat box. Okay. And we've got somebody on the phone as well. Thank you for joining. And, be sure, as I mentioned before, go out to the Facebook page, Extraordinary Parent Academy. If you're not a member, I'll be sure that you get access to it today. Just go ahead and request to join. And then go ahead and post one goal. Just share one goal. We can do this together. We need the support. I'm telling you, we need the support. And we can all help each other with this. Okay, let's see. Any questions? Okay, we're almost out of time. I'm going to do one last check. And I'd like to remind you that next week on January 9th, is when we're going to come back, okay? This will be our second and final session for this goal planning series, at least the introduction of it. And then if we want to continue, if I feel that, we need to do more, sessions, we can certainly do that. But you should be able to start, January right away with the information you learned today. And then let's come back next week. let's answer some questions, and let's share some of the goals, and let's see where we're going from this. Now, what you downloaded was a 6-month plan, because I think 6 months is enough to get started, especially if you haven't set goals like this before. I think looking at a 12-month calendar, it's just going to be overwhelming. Okay, so we're going to do half that year. And plus, we've got the summer coming after, June, starting of June, and that looks a little different. And I have some different activities when that comes around. But between now and the end of the school season, there are some effective things that we can do that can be really a game changer not only for our children, but for us as parents, right? And reduce some of that stress and bring back that joy and love for learning that, existed when I was a kid, Okay, so that's it. And thank you for joining, and be sure to post any questions you have in the Facebook group. I'll get back to you with that, and I hope to see you all next week. Thanks again, and bye for now.